Well, welcome to co-parenting without the chaos. It does exist. It can exist. And I'm really glad you're here to actually show up for yourself, really. That, you're curious and you're willing. Let's put it that way. So whether you're really newly separated or have been co-parenting for a while, one thing is probably true because it was true for me. Communicating with your ex is, or with your co-parent, can feel like it's like navigating a minefield, right? Often sort of like parallel parenting. And I don't know if you guys have heard that term, but that term is really kind of defines a lot of parenting styles, to be honest, because two people have very different views on how they parent and what they do at their own homes. So it's also okay if you're doing that and you're not actually co-parenting. And you're balancing your child's needs, their emotional well-being, and often someone else's unpredictability in this case scenario. So I've been there, and what I've learned personally and professionally in this is that you definitely don't have to be perfect, and there is no perfection in it, but you do need to have strategies, right? That kind of actually hold up, frameworks you can rely on in that heat of the moment, especially when you're triggered, and techniques that kind of help you stay grounded and clear. So today I'm going to walk you through one of those frameworks, a 5-step method that's helped so many people shift from that reactive state to a more confident one, including myself. I also want to just know if this is kind of, I'm going to put it out there. You guys don't have to answer. Later on, we'll have some time to have a Q&A, but if this is something that's relatable, that you guys are going through, that like emotional weight of overthinking every text or communication with your ex, right? It's like, should I send this? Should I not do this? Should I, reach out? Can I ask this question? All those things, it kind of paralyze you before you engage in that communication, right? So it's also that self-doubt. Right? So if this resonates with you, you're not alone, and you're not dramatic, and you're not overthinking. It is something that's for real present in this kind of scenario, especially when you're dealing with somebody who could be quite difficult on the other side. So I'm going to walk you through this 5-step communication framework, and hopefully you leave with a practical method that you can lean on in real conversations. And you'll also walk away with strategies for staying steady when tensions run high. So you'll also, and this is something that's pretty important, language that helps de-escalate without diminishing your truth, right? Or strength. And we often get really caught up in the words and what we're saying. And it's really actually better to say less, to be honest, and very clear, intention. So whether you're dealing with silence or blame, or just sheer communication fatigue, this workshop is for you. So let's try to give your nervous system a little break and your voice some structure, is what I like to say. But before we dive in, I want to introduce you to me. Who am I? So I'm Laila Ali, a mediator, a certified divorce coach, a certified amicable divorce coach, and a mother to a teenage daughter. I'm also the co-founder of Split.fyi, which is a platform that's created to offer that kind of support that I really wish I had when I was going through my own divorce. When I went through my separation, I was pregnant and totally blindsided. So very overwhelmed and exhausted. And I was trying to make major decisions with someone I could barely communicate with. And things were just spiraling out of control. So the system I couldn't rely on was really what triggered me to do what I do now, because I felt that it was cold. You're dealing with lawyers, you're dealing with law, you're dealing with all these things that didn't even touch with that emotional aspect of divorce, right? Or that fear, or that, especially when you have kids. So I often felt like I was navigating it alone. And that experience led me to become a certified mediator because I actually wanted to take control of my own story, right? And my own process. Then I became a divorce coach, so I could help others do the same, not just with strategy, but really emotional support and communication tools that actually work. And I've actually coached hundreds of individuals through this process. My specialty, even though it doesn't sound like it right now because my words are fumbling, is communication. to be honest. And it's helping people find their voice again and learn how to like really speak clearly and calmly, even in those moments that are super heated. Because it's really not about saying things perfectly. It's really about saying it the way that you can feel good about it later. So that's really what this session is about. So we'll dive in. This communication framework is pretty simple, actually, and it's effective. And it's built for real life tension, not ideal circumstances, right? So it's called the C.L.E.A.R framework. And it's what I teach when someone says, hey, I just want something, but I don't want to make it worse. I want to say it, but I know that it's going to cause a fight and I don't know what to say. Or I keep getting stonewalled and I don't know how to break the loop. Or even I'm too emotional and I shut down completely and I'm just so in fear that I don't know what to say and how to say it. So this 5-step method helps you stay anchored and intentional, especially when you're triggered. So C is for clarify your intent, and we're going to dive into this step by step, but L is lay out the facts, E, explain your situation, and A, ask for a specific outcome, and R, request a dialogue. You'll also have this, recording, and you guys can screenshot this just so that you have it. I often say to everyone, and I'll tell you guys again, have it on a sticky note, have it on your computer, have it everywhere, because obviously this takes practice, right? And really this is about protecting your peace and communicating in a way that reflects your values, even under pressure. So let's break it down step by step. So clarify your intent. Before you say anything, pause and ask yourself, what am I actually trying to accomplish? Am I confirming a plan, asking for help, clearing up a misunderstanding? I mean, what is it that final outcome that I really want? And I know this sounds really simple and it really can change everything, but it's really difficult sometimes to do, right? Because you don't actually know sometimes because you're so jaded with so many things that are going on in your mind. But take that one specific thing that you're trying to get that outcome for. When we skip this, we tend to lead with frustration, assumptions, or tone, and the message gets really muddled, right? We kind of lose sight of what we're supposed to be doing or saying. But when you're clear in your intention, it gives the message direction, and it helps you filter out that noise, and focus on what really needs to be said. So clarity, clarity, clarity also reduces the overwhelm. And when you know what you're asking for, honestly, you're less likely to over-explain or defend or second guess, which is often the case that happens. Happened to me many times. So try sticking to one clear point in the message, especially when things are tense. And if you're asking for multiple things at once, it's harder to get a response. So it's easier for just the other person to also derail the conversation when you're asking for so many things. So one clear message, one clear goal, and that's your anchor. Honestly, this alone can be the difference between spiraling and feeling stuck and staying steady. So step number 2, lay out the facts. Okay, once you're clear on your intent, the next step is to lead with what's true, not what you assume, feel, or interpret. This is a hard one because facts are neutral territory, right? Sometimes we want to put our feelings into that, that communication. And this really helps de-escalate the tension and create a starting point that isn't automatically charged. So instead of saying, you always forget the school schedule, you could try, the school sent out an email this morning about early dismissal on Friday, right? Just state out the facts. Don't get into the weeds of what the other person does and doesn't do all the time. It's grounded, it's verifiable, and it helps keep the other person from going into defense mode. So another example in maybe a more tense moment would be like when they're late to respond or unaware of a schedule change and you're frustrated, right? You're like super frustrated that they're not responding. You might want to say, instead of saying, you never bother reading the school updates or staying on top of the schedule changes, which while that might be really accurate, it also comes off as accusatory. So, and it instantly puts the other person on the defense. So here's a more grounded version. The school sent out an email for early dismissal on Friday. It was sent to both of us. So just checking if you caught this. You're still sharing what's true, but now you're leading with a neutral tone and inviting collaboration instead of conflict. And when you lay out those facts without layering on blame, you do create more space for resolution, even in a high conflict dynamic. That space really matters. So facts first, emotions later, if at all. Step 3. So explain your situation. Well, this step is about offering a little context, but not over explaining or justifying or defending. Very important here. You're not here to prove your case. You're simply helping the other person understand the logistics of where you're coming from. For example, I'm in a meeting that afternoon and won't be able for pickup. It's calm, it's clear, and it gives you just enough to move the conversation forward. So ask yourself, what does the other person actually need to know in order to understand this message, right? If it's not essential to that understanding, it probably doesn't belong in the message. So you're stating your reality, not for approval, but for clarity. Remember that. And often we get so caught up in wanting it to happen or having that outcome that we need that we're like over explaining or over sharing way too much detail and information, right? Which then can also put that other person in defense mode or like, why should I do this? So when you do that confidently and succinctly, you're far less likely to get drawn into like unnecessary back and forth emotional side roads. Step 4. Okay. So once you've shared the facts and your current situation, it's time to get specific about what you actually need. So this is where many people get stuck. They hint, they hope the other person reads between the lines, or they ask in a way that's so soft it gets kind of ignored because they kind of skate around what their need is, right? And again, that also helps when you're very clear. So if you're not clear, then it's really hard to get to what you really need. So instead of saying, let's say, it'd be nice if someone helped once, or something like that, or you could just try, would you be able to do pickup that day? The first version is vague, emotionally loaded. The second is clear, actionable, and easy to say yes or no to. And that's really what you want. You don't want to get into a back and forth. You just want a yes or no. Can you do it? Can you not? Right? So don't bury your ask under a paragraph of backstory. Say it simply. Say it directly, not with anger, but with clarity. So this is where so many conversations kind of go sideways, not because of what's being asked, but because of how it's being asked. So when in doubt, ask yourself, is this request specific, doable, and clearly stated? And I often go to like, how would I want to be asked? Literally, just do as how you would want to feel, right? And don't get caught up of how the other person is and acts and does. So the last step, request for dialogue or resolution. This last step is one that people often skip, especially when communication has been strained. And I get it. Like when you're really dealing with somebody very difficult, you probably don't want to kind of rope this in. But when ending your message with a clear, calm invitation to respond and it can make a big difference in how it lands, right? So think of the closing loop gently. Instead of just signing off or making a demand, you say, hey, let me know if that works for you or if we need to adjust, things like that. It signals collaboration and no assumptions, even if you don't fully trust the other person to engage. And it gives them a way back, into the conversation without escalating things. It makes them feel also like they have a say in it, which is important because you would want to feel the same, right? You don't want to be demanded something to. You don't want to like be told what to do. You want that collaboration. And it doesn't mean that you're giving up your boundaries, by the way. It just means that you're creating a space for resolution instead of that control. And if they don't respond, you'll still have shown up clearly, respectfully, and in integrity. And that's what you can control, and that's where your power lives. You can't control that other person, but you really can control how you're behaving and how you're acting and what you're saying, right? And that's all that counts, to be honest. So here's what this looks like in practice. So same situation, two very different approaches. In the before example, which is you always back out, I can't rely on you, well, the message is reactive. It leads with blame, emotion, and a generalization. Even, okay, if it's rooted in truth, I get that, it still puts the other person on defense immediately and usually makes things 100% worse, right? So look at the after version with the C.L.E.A.R formula intact. So we agreed on Friday, pick up. It adds enough context, and I have a meeting, can you still do it? It adds enough context that, it clearly asks for a response, can you still do it, right? So these are all things that it kind of breaks down, right? The C.L.E.A.R. So starts with the reference point, we agreed on Friday pickup. It adds just enough context, I have a meeting, and it clearly asks for a response. Can you still do it? No accusations, no spiraling, just a clear message that invites a clear reply. This is how small shifts in language can create big shifts in outcome. And the more you practice it, the easier it gets to respond. This is even like it can even happen in the moments when you're charged. Honestly, now it's like my go-to, and it's just the way that I respond. I've practiced it so many times. A lot of my clients have. It's like great because it's a little bit hard in the beginning. I totally understand it. We're all emotional human beings, and we are triggered, and we are dealing with maybe somebody who's really difficult on the other side. But I will say, honestly, you start practicing this technique, it also softens that other person eventually. Trust me. So let's walk through some real life scenarios. So what about things when things aren't that simple? What about when you're being accused of something that isn't actually true? That often happens. Or the other person is vague, passive aggressive, or just straight up won't respond, which also happens a lot. These are moments where C.L.E.A.R becomes more than a concept. It becomes like you're calm in the chaos. So let's walk through a few of those real life examples next so that you can start to see how this structure can show up in every kind of scenario. So the accusation scenario, right? This is, I don't know, one of the most emotionally triggered moments in co-parenting, because when you're blamed for something that isn't true, super hard, right? Your instinct is always to defend yourself. Especially you're angry or frustrated, you're all those things, which is justifiable. But maybe you're okay. So let's take a scenario. Maybe you're accused of manipulating the schedule or keeping the kids away when that's not your reality at all. And it's painful, I know. But this is where the C.L.E.A.R formula really helps you stay centered. So here's the accusation, right? You're clearly trying to keep me from seeing the kids. I've had enough of your games. All right. So it's loaded and it's designed to provoke. Remember that, right? So instead of taking the bait, pause, take a deep breath. I don't know. I use so many techniques. Sometimes I just snap my fingers and I'm like back in the room. I've talked about this so many times. I don't know if you guys follow me on social, but this is like one of my go-tos that I'm like, breathe and go back in the room, because I know my mind can go into so many different places, especially the past. So it's like the act of doing something, snapping your fingers and telling yourself back in the room means it's like, I'm going back into this present moment. Breathe it out, right? And actually ask yourself, like, what's actually true here? What's my intention in responding, right? Like, I'm not going to change their mind or whatever they are, but I'm going to respond with some clarity, right? And so here's a good way to respond. I hear that you're frustrated, but I want to be clear. I am not trying to withhold time or create conflict. Let's look at the calendar together and figure out what's workable for both of us. Again, you're not apologizing for something you didn't do. You're not escalating the conflict. You're modeling grounded communication, even in the face of intensity, right? So that's where the power is, in choosing a response that protects your peace and refocus the conversations on solution. Then it's up to the other parent to engage in that, right? So here's another scenario: passive aggressive or stonewalling. These patterns that show up all the time in co-parenting, I know, it's maybe it's a comment like, wow, must be nice to always get your way. I'm just taking that as an example. Or maybe it's a follow-up, you're still waiting for a response, or either way, it's like they're just not even responding to what you say and you put out there. It hits the same nerve, by the way. So you feel provoked, you feel dismissed, or you're kind of like talking to the void, right? And their urge might be to call it out or shut it down. But instead of reacting or matching that tone, this is your chance to kind of stay grounded, right? And redirect. So try something like, well, I want to make sure we're on the same page and working towards what's best for the kids. If something's off, I'm open to talking it through. This does a few important things. It brings the focus back to a shared purpose on your children. It opens a door, but on your terms, and it holds your boundary without inviting more drama, right? Passive digs and stonewalling thrive on emotional reaction. But when you respond with calm, clarity, honestly, you change that tone. And sometimes that alone shifts the outcome. So basically, it's just not diving in and being or reacting the way that they're really looking for you to react so they can justify how they're behaving, right? So sometimes talking it through isn't possible, and I'm totally aware of that. And I often tell everyone, put everything in writing. That's way safer. Then there's no, but you said this, but you said that. Everything should be really in writing. So maybe your co-parent shuts down and lashes out or twists your words all the time, So these are moments. Your goal isn't for resolution, it's for regulation. So remember that. And I always put that in, like, I write that down. I'm like, my goal is not for resolution, it's regulation. I need to regulate myself, regulate the situation, right? There might not be a resolution with your co-parent, right? That you kind of have to reserve like an acceptance to, but it's important that you're calm and clear and grounded, and that every time they don't hijack that peace within you, right? They don't hijack that amygdala brain, part of your brain that's like, just all over the place. So this is where the C.L.E.A.R framework really becomes less about a conversation and more about emotional boundary, really, right? So here are a few responses you can use when dialogue isn't realistic. And I've shared all this, right? Realistic, right? So, hey, I've shared all the info I have at this time. I'm just taking some like case scenarios, right? Thanks for the update. That's it. That's all you need. Let's stick to the agreement. That is one that I always say that boundary can always, especially if you have one that other parent that really likes to go rogue on that. You have to constantly say, no, let's stick to the agreement. Or I'm not willing to revisit this conversation. If they're trying to instigate and continue to talk about something that you really don't want to, you have every right to be like, I'm just not willing to revisit this conversation. And they're not passive, they're strategic. You're staying aligned with your values and removing yourself from that circular draining dynamic that, you tend to do. Even when they're not really engaging, you still have a choice in how you show up. And that's where your power really is. Okay, let's take a deep breath. I know I'm kind of running through this. I definitely had my coffee this morning and I am going fast. But let's recap what we've covered so far. So you've now got a 5-step framework where you can come back to when communication feels tense and unclear, emotionally charged. But you've also seen how it plays out in tough situations, accusations, passive digs, stonewalling. And you've also learned that even when the other person won't meet you halfway, you still get to choose how you show up. And that really does change the dynamic. This work isn't about, remember, fixing the dynamic overnight. It's about really shifting your part so that you feel more steady, more clear, and less depleted. So next we'll walk through one more challenging dynamic: what to do when your child is being used as a messenger. Yep, the triangulation scenario. Oh, this often shows up and it's super triggering. Your child becomes that go-between, right? Maybe your co-parent texts something like, well, our child or my child, and that's even more triggering, said, you told them I don't care enough to show up for their event. That's unacceptable. Honestly, I've actually heard that one. That's why I used it myself. So in that moment, your instinct is obviously to fire back or prove your point or go to a defense mode, all those things, right? Because that is totally like not true. But in reality, you don't have to over explain or to validate your truth. Remember, what we went through earlier on. So we talked about this. What you can do is hold a clear, steady boundary while redirecting the focus to your child's well-being. That's what's most important. So here's one way to respond. I'd never want our child to feel stuck in the middle. I haven't said anything like that. And I'd like us both to focus on helping them feel supported by both parents. If there's a concern, I'm open to discussing it directly. Again, with just a few calm sentences, you've literally done three things. You've protected your child from triangulation. You've held your line without escalating, right? And you've modeled like respectful co-parenting, even if it's one-sided. And that's the power of showing up with intention instead of that reaction, honestly. Because that's exactly what they're trying to do, right? Okay, let's go into. So let's take a moment to bring this back to your world. Think about like a recent message or conversation that left you frustrated, stuck, or second guessing yourself. Maybe you never sent it. Maybe you had a message that you had to write back, or maybe you did and you regret how it landed, or what might the message have looked like if you had paused and clarified your intent, or stuck to the facts and made a clear, grounded ask, all those things that we've learned. I mean, here's actually a great example of how what I say often. You text something like, you're late again. Do you even care about their schedule? Okay, so in that moment, it does feel justified because it's true, right? But it fuels the conflict. And instead, imagine saying, I noticed pickup ran late today. Can we touch base about timing next week to avoid confusion? One version invites the fight, the other invites a solution. This is what the C.L.E.A.R framework really helps you do. So not just avoiding, blow-ups, but build a communication habit that reduces the stress over time, right? Because you're leading that. And that's okay. Often I get a pushback and say, well, if the other parent doesn't communicate that way, if the other parent is doing this, I get that. But you can, consistently show up in this way. Trust me, it's like they have a stone wall that they're hitting every time they're trying to make it more dramatic or conflicting. They just can't because you're not engaging in it, right? So you just have to be persistent. I'm telling you. And I mentioned, it's like one thing it's to learn it, but it's another to live it. So you really got it. It just takes practice. You might not get it the first time, the second time, the third time. It might take months, but you'll get there. And that's what's really important. So practice matters. And sometimes you actually need to say it out loud first. Sometimes you need someone to help you untangle what you're trying to say. And that's also very normal, I found like a trusted friend. Honestly, friends though, don't love to get super involved in all of this. I was lucky enough to have somebody who was just my go-to and said, I'm going to say this. What do you think? She's a therapist. It helps that I had somebody who was willing to do that. But sometimes you just need to hear, yeah, that's a tough one. But here's what I've tried. That's also gold dust, right? Find that community. And remember, you don't have to rehearse these conversations in your head forever. Don't let this like hijack your time and space, and you also don't have to white knuckle every message or overthink every comma, honestly. You're going to get to a place where it's just your natural go-to and how you respond. So having a space to walk it through with someone who actually gets it can also make the difference in how steady you feel. So if anything that we've actually talked about today really sounds and feels familiar, and you draft a message and rewrite it 5 times or maybe even 100, or you finally send it and then you spiral for hours wondering if it's it's made things worse, or you're constantly bracing yourself, for the next blow up or the next passive dig or the next email that knocks the wind out of you. Or you actually wonder if you're overreacting or even wonder if you're the problem. God, often I really get that, people are like, is it me? Is it me? Like, or you start kind of believing some of these accusations. You're so thrown off guard. And you're feeling really always questioning your parenting. Oh my God, it's awful. You can't just concentrate on you and your ecosystem and your parenting and your household, right? So if you're really tired of all of that, and trying to be both the anchor and the storm shelter, it's not because you're weak. It's because you've really been doing this alone, honestly. And sometimes we're doing it too much in our heads. Um, so this isn't just hard, it's confusing and it's draining and it's isolating. So please be aware of that. This isn't something that's easy to go through. And when fear drives our communication and our second guessing becomes the norm, right? But it doesn't have to also stay that way. So let me show you what it looks like when you have the right support in place. So let's talk about when you actually helps when you have a conversation that gets hard, when you're triggered, backed into like a corner or staring at like, that blinding, like that blinking cursor. You're like, oh my God, should I send this? Here's what we teach people to do inside Split.fyi. And this is where I'm going to rope it back to the community that we have and what, you can start doing right now. Practice your message, before you send it. Even writing it out down, reading it out loud and help you catch the tone. You can help yourself catch the tone and reactivity and like put it, like I said before, to somebody, or maybe help, get somebody professional that kind of can help you through it. That's what coaching does. Honestly, I wish I had I wish I had my business partner, Heather, when I was going through all this. And I wish I had the Split.fyi community. Honestly, I myself was so desperate for that touch point in that community that I actually attended some church meetings on divorce just in hopes to connect with other people who are going through it. But it really, you do learn from a lot of other people as well, right? So what does support actually look like when you are in the thick of it? Here's some real things that people have actually brought into Split.fyi sessions. Someone shares a message from their co-parent that's a passive aggressive and vague, and we work through a calm, firm reply, one that protects the parenting structure and their energy, right? Another member says, well, I want to ask for a schedule change, but I know how that person's, the parent's going to react. So we walk through how to make the request using the C.L.E.A.R method with a neutral tone, clear boundaries, and plan B in case it's ignored also. So there's a lot of strategy that goes into that. Or someone's not sure if what's happening is okay. And we unpack the dynamic, the red flags, and help them make informed next steps without jumping to extremes. And all this is done in this like ecosystem where you've got professionals and other individuals who have gone through it or going through it. Maybe you've come out the other side, have had same co-parenting dynamics. So you really do learn a lot. And this isn't hypothetical. This is actually happening every week in like our coffee talks, our office hours, and our group chats. People aren't just like sharing, they're strategizing and they're walking away with messages they're proud to send. So remember, you don't need to be perfect at this, but you just need the space where you can practice, refine, and build that muscle over time. Anyway, I know I rushed through all of this. I talk really fast. I really want to thank you guys all for being here today and investing this time with yourself. It does mean something that you show up for this, honestly. And if this workshop gave you a little more clarity or helped you even a bit, I'm so happy. And that's what the intention was. And as a thank you, we are offering actually 15% off our Growth and Thrive memberships for the next few days. And that gives you full access to everything inside of Split.fyi, including live support calls, coaching spaces, and expert guidance when you need it. So you also get the option to book a free one-on-one consult with me, no pressure, just a space to talk about where you're stuck and how to move forward. And if you are curious about what's behind the curtain, what Split.fyi actually looks like day to day, just reach out. I'm also happy to give you a sneak peek and answer any of your questions. So the details will be in your emails that will follow up with the replay. Yeah, and I hope with this, you've got some more, clarity and calm, and reminded that you're not meant to carry this all on your own. So I'm going to put this up and leave this up for a bit. I'm going to stop the recording. You guys can even take a screenshot. Again, this recording will be given to you, so you always have this.